Good afternoon. At this time, we'd like to call to order a special council meeting for March 11th, 2022. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Here.
Councilmember Cormack. Here. Vice Mayor Koo.
Here.
Councilmember Filsa.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
And Councilmember Tanaka. For the record, we have 6 present.
Thank you. So before proceeding to our one agendized item, which is interviews with candidates for the Architectural Review Board, we have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any item that is not on the agenda that pertains to purview of the city. And do we have any speakers?
We don't have any in the public, and no one has raised their hand online.
Thank you. So welcome, and we have a combination of candidates who are here in the chambers and those who are participating remotely by Zoom. So our first candidate is Alfred Mandel. Welcome, and are we equipped for Mr. Mandel to join us down here and right at the table, so it's a little less formal? These chambers can be a little awkward for just discussion. And then you'll need to hit that button on the mic. So good evening or afternoon. The way we do this is welcome you to spend a minute or so, just introductory remarks, and then we'll go into questions. And if we have time at the end, you can do a brief wrap up. But would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, council members, for inviting me and the opportunity to apply for the Architectural Review Board. I've lived in Palo Alto for 42 years, downtown here for the last 29 in the same place. I rode my bike here for this meeting. I retired at the end of 2021 and decided that I wanted to find ways to support my community and the city I love. And I have expertise and a bit of experience in architecture review, so I thought that would be the opportunity came available. You have my background in front of you, but in essence, when I was in graduate school and architecture school at the University of Oregon, I interned at the Lane County Planning Department. I did my work mostly in environmental preservation and conservation of energy, but as an intern, you also learn everything there is to do in the city council and the planning department's offices. So we did architecture review. We looked at site suitability, environmental considerations, including preservation and a harmonious application of architectural design within the environment. Lane County, the seat is Eugene, where the University of Oregon is, where I was attending school. I also ended up working for the state legislature, writing environmental legislation, the bottle bill, which is the CRV on your cans and bottles that started in Oregon. And I wrote the filibuster for that in 1977. It's now used in 48 of 50 states.
Great, thank you. So colleagues, who would like to start off with a question? I'll note that Councilmember Tanaka has joined us. So Councilmember Du Bois.
Yes, so do you have an architecture degree then?
I have 2 degrees from the University of Oregon School of Architecture, one in Masters in Urban Regional Planning and one Environmental Design.
Okay.
I don't have an AIA degree.
Okay.
It's credentials, sorry. I did graduate from the School of Architecture.
And have you worked on any like commercial projects, development projects?
Only my own.
Only your house?
I've remodeled 5 houses.
Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. So
I've not worked on any large commercial projects outside of the university.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mary. Good Lord, it's been a long week. Thank you, Mayor Burt, and good evening and welcome, Mr. Mandel. My question is more about how you do your work than what kind of work you do. So what are 2 words that people who have worked with you would use to describe you and how you do your work?
Detail oriented, easygoing, focused.
You're already at 3.
That's the only 3 I can think of.
No, that's fine.
That's if we
Okay.
don't hyphenate.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Mr. Mandel. Thanks for being here and for applying. Just one question. I saw one of your goals, if you're appointed, is regarding retaining retail locations. I'm curious, how do you plan on achieving that goal if you're a member of the ARB?
What did you say, head of retail locations?
Sorry, your application said that if you're appointed, one of the goals you hope to achieve is to retain retail locations.
Well, you can see that we've had, because of the pandemic and just some other issues relating to the rental and utilization of commercial properties, particularly on University Avenue, we have to balance between the cost of rent against the amount of traffic, that foot traffic and customer traffic. And it's always kind of a balancing act. But I think if we look, at least in my 40 years here, you've seen quite a change in the complexion of the retail market here. And it's the bigger guys and the little guys are going away. The SOS market that I've gone to for 35 years is gone. Of course, the pandemic exacerbated that, but that problem was already ongoing. It's one of the reasons we built 4 large parking structures, because we had so much business, but not enough places to bring people to park their cars. So that's the kind of thing I was referring to, is how do we balance the equitable use of land and property for retail space and make it affordable parking for employees. That's where we have a permit process now for downtown parking, et cetera. So it's all those things, because you have to keep the community vibrant and you have to have money to do that. And that money comes from taxes that are charged for businesses. But if it's unpractical for businesses to be here, they won't be. Markets are very, very brutally efficient.
And Councilmember Philsett.
Yeah, so thank you for volunteering and being willing to do this. Much appreciated. The Architectural Review Board focuses on things like, on design standards and so forth. The crazy economics of this part of the valley in particular tend to push projects in one direction that may not be sort of optimal from a design standards and aesthetics perspective. How should we balance those things? How should we balance that tension?
I mean, that's the $64,000 question. In any project, you want to consider what's the best for the community, the desirability of living here. You have to balance that with the economics of projects that need to be built and commercial real estate and commercial developers' desire to do things, but do it in a more harmonious way as possible, not only from an aesthetics point of view, but energy conservation point of view. So, I mean, if it was easy, you wouldn't have to have a review board, right? There's a lot of variables that are always considered. I think one of the biggest things I learned in school and doing masters in urban regional planning is you have to think longer term. People want to do things in short term to make profits and or to do fixes that are more like band-aids, end up not being so good in the long term. And because Palo Alto residents and Palo Alto as a city tend to have people live here for a long time, me included, I like to try to resolve these kind of issues and develop a point of view that's going to be longer in term.
You done there? Okay. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Koo.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel, for being here today. First, I want to say I love your email address. Alfred the Great. That is really great.
I didn't,
You didn't come
someone
up
gave
with
that
it?
to me.
I was
I
gonna
was
s-
actually going to ask how long ago you had to reserve that.
I was a beta tester for Google on Gmail, and they accidentally erased 65,000 people in the early days. And so they said, well, we'll find you another email address, and that's what they sent me, and I kept it.
Well, I really like it.
Actually, I was Alfred at Gmail.
Oh,
That's how
okay.
early I was, yeah.
Well, I was gonna copy it, but I don't know if I'm that great, but okay. I see that you mentioned that you lived in downtown for the past 30 years and previously in South Palo Alto. Obviously, you've seen a lot of changes here. How would you consider harmonious development when we have most of South Palo Alto, single-family residences, lower density, right, compared to downtown here? How would you see high density going into the single family neighborhoods?
I got everything except what you're asking me for. What's the difference between the southern part of Palo Alto in terms of residential density, or?
No, actually, how would you, when you're looking at a project and how it would remain compatible to the different neighborhoods, the densities, right? Downtown here is a lot more higher versus South Palo Alto, which is a lot of single family homes, 1 story, 2 stories. So how would you look at a project that comes forward, and how would you kind of see how it could
Well,
fit into the neighborhoods?
you have a uniform building code, and then you have zonings. And the zoning is supposed to take care of some of the mixed use or possible R1, R2 uses. And they should be unilaterally applied across the city regardless of the geographic location. However, again, economics play. Property get more valuable where there's more use for them. So things in South Palo Alto probably per square foot and for consideration of building costs and all those sort of things will be different than in the more dense downtown part of Palo Alto. How do you balance that? You provide architecture review that looks at the thing in situ that's around it and see if it's compatible, and if it is, again, harmonious and desirable in construction and meets the city's requirements. I read the minutes of your last meeting regarding a property that's under proposed development on Charleston Avenue. I think it's 520, where they want to build 50 new units. Well, that will be out of scale probably with everything around that part of Charleston. I'm not familiar with that specific address. But yeah, due consideration has to be made again for the economics. And this is for specific use, in this case for people with special needs. So you'll make special considerations. You have to be flexible. You just have to be considerate.
Thank you.
Well, we've run out of time, but thank you very much. I'll just say I'm intrigued. We have one position on the ARB that doesn't specifically require an architectural degree. Yours from the architectural school creates an ambiguity, but we had a former city attorney in charge of land use who brought a complementary perspective to the ARB. So I'm intrigued by your urban planning and other related backgrounds. So thank you very much.
I thank you all for your time. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, our next candidate is Curtis Smoller, who is joining us by Zoom. Mr. Smoller, are you with us? And would you like to take about a minute to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. My name is Curtis Smoller. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for approximately 25 years. During my practice, I counsel clients in all areas of land use, planning, and zoning in the Bay Area. I'm experienced in securing approval of projects ranging from office to retail to residential developments. That included types of discretionary entitlements, zoning variances, conditional use authorizations, and developments. Basically, I am not an architect. However, I have a complementary skill set that works with architects. So my job, I would see my job as being able to interpret the codes and laws and help the architects who are on the board already implement the laws and codes that already are there. I've also seen that the majority of people that are on this I'm the only lawyer I believe that you're talking to today, and I'm the only person who I think has the experience on the other side of the table of going and arguing about these issues in front of in front of planning and in front of city councils and in front of the courts. To be honest, I have also experience with CEQA and other areas. So I think that sort of gives you a good background of who I am.
Thank you. Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, hi, thanks for applying. I'm basically asking everybody the same questions. So are you a licensed architect?
I am not.
Right. But you say you've represented some projects. What's the largest project that you've been involved in, commercial project?
The largest commercial project I was involved with was in San Francisco. It was for a private university. I can't disclose the name of it, but it was, I believe, I think it was $50 million to $70 million project, taking up multiple blocks in downtown San Francisco.
Was it mixed use or was it all academic buildings? Or?
It was mixed use because of the fact that it was dormitories and offices and a lot of different things were going on in that same space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would like to go next? Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mayor Burt. Mr. Smoller, hello. I also usually ask the same question of everyone, and I've probably done it with you before, but refresh my memory. What are 2 words that people who have worked with you would use to describe you and how you do your work?
I think the first word would be collaborative. I work with people, I work with architects, and I work with contractors on interpreting codes and going forward in that way. And I would say, and this is not sort of, I think the other one is trustworthy. Basically, I'm honest and people ask me my opinions and I give them to them, even though it might be an inconvenient truth. I tell them what I think the actual answer is versus trying to give them a political answer.
Thank you so much.
Can you, I'll go ahead because I don't see any other lights yet. Can you share with us your notion about the issue that Councilmember Koo raised with the last applicant of how you view the role of higher density housing in low density residential neighborhoods?
So the way I would see this is that this, the decision for this is not my job, right? It wouldn't be my job to make that decision. My job would be to look at the code and to look at the law and see how it applies. Also to see the character of the area, whether it's too big, too bulky, and out of character with the area, and whether or not zoning and planning all together would what they're saying. Again, I would be looking at. I would be supporting local zoning and how it is applied currently. I wouldn't be interested in implementing my own ideas.
We've seen candidates for the federal Supreme Court who have across the political spectrum claim similar things that they really just call balls and strikes, when in reality they're guided by their values and their vision. As well as, or how that influences their interpretation of law and code. So can you share a little bit more on your vision for architecture in our community and compatibility?
So I believe in multifamily housing in appropriate places. I believe that you'd be looking at the community standards and you wouldn't be trying to impose your own ideas on it. I've been both a landlord and a tenant, and I see both sides of that issue. I've represented landlords and tenants. One of the things I do right now is I donate my time pro bono in East Palo Alto regarding that. So, I mean, I'm willing and I am able to see both sides of an issue. And I know that it seems trite in today's society to say that you just call balls and strikes, but I mean, I really do see it that way. And I think that when you have people who are being nominated to the Supreme Court, they obviously have a political agenda because of who is nominated them. Basically, my job would be to represent the city, right? I'd be and not to represent myself or my own sort of agenda. And instead, I'd be looking at how I can help, how I can work within the city framework, apply the codes, apply the laws, and that's what I would be doing.
Hey, thank you. Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Mr. Smoller. Thank you for applying. You said in your application that you've represented numerous clients in the process of going through the architectural review process, the permitting process. How will that experience? I think your legal experience is unique, and so how do you think that being on that side of it and that experience is really going to allow you to differentiate yourself under the ARB and be a real contributing member?
Well, I think one thing is that I have the experience of someone who would be in front of me. In other words, I wouldn't be just sort of looking at this from an ivory tower. My understanding, I've been on both sides of projects. I understand that compromises have to be made. I would be listening. I'd be empathetic. I'd be trying to figure out, if there's a solution that we can come to after consulting the architects and planning and zoning, and try to work with people and collaborate on a solution which both follows the law and look for a realistic compromise.
Great, thank you.
And if you'd like to take a moment or two and offer any wrap-up comments, you're welcome.
All I would say is, again, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure speaking to everyone. I believe that although I'm not an architect, my skills are complementary and would be very useful to the people who are currently on the ARB. And I think that I would be a great asset to both the ARB and to the city. So thank you again.
Thank you. All right. So our next candidate is by Zoom, and that is Yingxi Chen. Welcome. There we are.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Yingxi Chen. I'm a licensed architect. So before I start my own practice, I worked with 2 architectural design firms where I had the chance to be involved into different types of projects, from school to hotel, resort, from ski lodge to car dealerships. So the first few years when I was still a junior designer, most of my work were to prepare the construction documents, such as assisting keynoting the drawings and draw the details based on the seasoned architect's sketches. So this allows me to better understanding how things put together. Then I started to be more involved in the front design phase, working directly under the principal architect, study and analyze the site and do space planning and prepare color board. So I think these brought me to a more holistic view of designing a project. So in recent years, I'm more focused on custom home design. I work directly with the clients, communicate with them about their expectations and concerns, and attend design review meetings, address the neighbors' concerns. And I think these interactions with diverse people and agencies allowed me to look at the project from different views and a broader perspective. So to me, buildings are more like a permanent commitment. And we as the architects shall take our responsibilities to design the quality buildings for people to live and work. And now when I see the opening position of the ARB, I felt it is even more meaningful. So I hope I can be of any help to shape a better community. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Du Bois.
Well, you already answered one of my questions. You're a licensed architect. What was the largest commercial project that you've worked on?
Well, I worked on a couple of corporate buildings, like office buildings, but it's, when I was working on that, we signed a confidential contract, so I cannot disclose their name. But they're including the campus planning and also office buildings and also their cafeterias, like including 12 or 13 different types of restaurants in that building.
How long have you lived in Palo Alto?
We moved here about 4 years ago.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mayor Burt. Hello, Ms. Chen. Thank you so much for applying today. I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everyone, which is, it's not only important what we do, but how we do it, our work. What are 2 words that people who work with you would use to describe you and how you do your work? And it can be in your professional work or your volunteer work.
I think one word is effective communicator, and the other is quick learner. So my background is I grew up in China and come to the US for graduate study and also transferred to Europe for a semester to study architecture there. So my experience tells me that when there are language barriers in a new place, so effective communications is really important. So I really rely even more on my eyes, and then I was able to read the situations when with more clarity and adjust my actions accordingly in order to be interactive efficiently. And I also need to find out a good approach to communicate depending on whom I'm talking to. So for example, when talking to my clients now, most of them don't have a professional background, understanding exactly what certain styles are and what architectural or certain architectural elements are. So I would always prefer to talk to them with conceptual images, and then they know what exactly I'm talking about. They all feel it's very helpful and straightforward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Ms. Chen. Thanks for your interest in serving the community. You wrote of privacy concerns in residential settings and said as an architect, you're always trying to find a way to find a balance while addressing certain concerns. I'm curious, what do you see needs to be balanced when it comes to respecting privacy concerns of residents in newly proposed buildings?
Well, I think each project is different and every situation is unique. So first, I am hired by my clients, so I need to be clear what they want and what they need, and then I'm represent them to talk to their neighbors and see how we can find a balance, right? Most of the time when doing single families, they're more about care about, oh, you have a window facing my bedroom, or you can look over my backyard. So we can either planting by using the plant screening, or maybe make orientations of windows, right? So some adjustment can always make it work.
Perfect. So I understand as working for a client, you have to do what they're looking for. But so just to clarify, you see from the city perspective, protecting the privacy of those residents is an important goal.
Right. Yeah. So So I think we in Palo Alto we have the high standards of all those zoning requirements, like limiting the building height and also the daylight plan. I think these are all helpful. And we also hold the meetings, and so that when neighbors have concerns, they can always come up and speak up and see, and everybody can be just on the same table, and we can start our conversation and find a better solution.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, thank you for applying. Really appreciate it. I was looking through your application, and one question I had for you is, um, as an architect, and it sounds like you've done work here in our city, what do you think we could do to streamline the ARB process? Because right now, it's known as a Palo Alto process, which can be very uncertain, very long. And, I've heard people who've gone through the process are sometimes really, really frustrated. So I was curious to see, what are your recommendations in terms of how to improve the process, but still make sure that projects are fully vetted?
Well, yeah. So actually, I watched a few videos, the ARB videos, and yes, I agree. Some of the meetings seems too long, and a lot of projects takes forever, and it is time consuming. But I would not call it inefficient. Sometimes there are just so many items on the board, and I think fully discussion before actions is always a good choice. And actually, I think all the architects provide lots of valuable inputs from different aspects. And I know some applicants kind of like complain there are inputs like back and forth. Their comments are back and forth. And I think sometimes it is they might change their mind due to new findings. So I think it is common and it is part of the learning process. And actually, it is good for us to reevaluate things when we have additional information and correct them on time. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Kind of, yeah. I just was wondering from your perspective, maybe things could be streamlined. So that's why I was just trying to figure out if you had any ideas or suggestions.
Okay. Vice Mayor Koo.
Thank you for your application, Ms. Chang. I wanted to find out, in our single family neighborhoods and with what the city has very much supported in the past, as well as now, is trees and open space. As you can see, those are pretty important features in Palo Alto. And single family neighborhoods are one of the larger areas where they have the backyard habitats and support those kind of things. Do you see that open space and trees as useful means of aesthetics?
Yeah, I think each city has its own character, and for us in Palo Alto, we are a low to mid density housing city, and we are a tree loving community. And I think we have nice parks here, and also I think for lots of good for almost all the good architectures, they can actually work well with the landscape with the existing trees, and the trees can provide better views and landscape and even privacy. So it's not like something we always want to get rid of. We can use it and we can build around it and create the beauty of the nature and the building.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you say we should keep it, which means that you're not just growing new trees, but keeping the more mature trees. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We've hit our interview time, and thank you for participating and offering.
Thank you very much for your time.
So our next candidate is also by Zoom, Kendra Rosenberg. Welcome.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me today.
Sorry, again?
Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, and you're welcome to provide a few introductory remarks for a minute or so, and then we'll ask questions.
Sounds great. Thank you guys very much. First and foremost, I'm a Palo Alto resident and have been my whole life. I'm literally living in the house I was born into. All next door to me when I was a child was an apricot orchard that we used to climb in the trees and steal apricots all day long. And now it's been developed into 2 beautiful houses that we have wonderful neighbors. We live in a nice little cul-de-sac, and we've been here for a very long time. So I'm a Palo Alton through and through. Additionally, I do work as an architect. So I have experience in the background on the other side of the table dealing with getting some plans submitted through Palo Alto. Recently, I have been sort of focusing my work more on Los Altos and Los Altos Hills and sort of divesting myself from Palo Alto a bit in terms of my architectural work, partially to have the capacity to sort of join the architectural review board, hopefully, and not have any sort of conflict of interest, make sure that my home and where I'm helping out is not the same thing as where I'm getting clients. But yeah, I'm really interested in the development of Palo Alto and how we see the homes develop specifically. I work only in residential architecture, and the ADUs have been very interesting to watch with the new SB 9. It's going to be very interesting to see how that develops as well. And I just want to help make sure that Palo Alto stays the beautiful city that I've known it to be my whole life.
Thank you. Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, hi. Thanks again for applying. If you've been listening, I've been asking the same questions all night.
Happy to hear.
But are you a licensed architect?
No, I'm what's called a residential designer. So I am licensed in basically every other state of the United States, but I did not take the California Architectural Review Board. So I have passed all the NCARB exams, so all 7 of those.
You didn't really list your education. Did you study architecture?
I got my bachelor's in architecture from Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and I got my master's of architecture at USC in Southern California. And I've been in the field. I worked at HKS Hill Glazier Studio in downtown Palo Alto. After that, I went to Duxbury Architects in Los Altos, where we did focus primarily on residential. I was poached back by a boss and went back to work for Peter Mason at Mason Architects for a year. And then I branched out and started my own firm about 5 years ago.
Okay. And can you describe the largest commercial project you've worked on, if you've ever worked on one?
Yes, well, commercial. So my first architectural job I did was actually related to aviation architecture. So we did worked over in DC. We did Dulles Airport, things as small as a kiosk to entire airport terminals. The biggest one that I sort of was my baby was we did a complete new NOAA campus. So for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's the one that I worked on for almost a full year to relocate that. Dulles Airport was taking over their space for a runway. So we built them a new campus. After that, it was mostly hotels, and we did do large hotels. So we did the Rosewood on 280, the Four Seasons over on the 101. And then we did the Four Seasons up in Calistoga was the last one that I worked on, most recent.
And were you focusing on a particular part of it?
Yeah,
Like
so
the hotel?
yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. What's interesting about hotels is there's an overall master planner, which is the architect, and then we will often spec out like the spa. So we say, here's your spa, and then it gets filled in by some other firm. Same thing with the restaurant. What I was predominantly focused on was the hotel lobby, the ballroom area, and the individual villas, the little casitas that we had.
Great. Okay. Thank you very well.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mayor Burt, and welcome, Ms. Rosenberg. Thanks for applying. My question is also the same consistently. What are 2 words that people would use to describe you and how you do your work?
Put me on the spot here. The first word would probably be creative. I'm very much a problem solver. I always believe that there's 100 different ways to solve a problem, and the goal is to sort of find the best for all parties involved. Sometimes it's a cost issue, sometimes it's an aesthetic issue, but there's always a bunch of different ways to solve a problem. So I would say a creative problem solver. The second would be just very upfront, very reliable, and very what you see is what you get. I don't believe in beating around the bush. And if I have an opinion, I'll give it to you. And if I don't have an opinion, I'll let you know that too.
Okay, WYSIWYG, got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Ms. Rosenberg. Thanks for being willing to bring your experience and passion to the ARB. Looking over your application, you wrote in it that you don't feel the city of Palo Alto is doing as good of a job as our neighbors. And I'm curious, which neighboring city were you referring to, and what about that process what makes it better than Palo Alto in your opinion, and how would you change the process as an ARB member in order to make it more effective in your mind?
It's a great question. And I apologize. I know I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep it short, and I'm happy to follow up with any additional questions. So I'm going to talk fast. Number one, most of the cities around here, Los Altos Hills, Portola Valley, Woodside, they usually have a two-step process. One is planning, one is building. Palo Alto, you kind of do it all at once, with the exception of IR. So internal review is a sort of a different beast, and that happens a little bit separately. I've had 2 projects now in Palo Alto recently where we have gotten pretty far into the project, getting structural plans done, getting Title 24 done, getting months of work done. And all of a sudden it feels like something comes up and then the project can't really continue. One of them was based on the lot was a trapezoidal shape, and based on how the site plan turned out and how the person I was talking to measured the distance of this trapezoid, they said, oh, you're not deep enough. You can't build a 2-story project. So we were 6 months deep into this project, thousands of dollars spent out to other firms to get the consultings. And we had been through 2 reviews with the city already to find out this really project stopping issue kind of late in the game. With some of the other cities, when they have the 2-phase, and I know that may not even be a possibility with Palo Alto, so just for what it's worth, with the 2-phase step, you know that by the time planning has approved, you really can engage the consultants with some confidence the project can be built the way you would like it to be built. With Palo Alto, you kind of have to do it all at once and just kind of hope for the best. So in my opinion, I know that the 2-step takes longer. However, you end up kind of at the same route, because sometimes with Palo Alto, you can have so many rounds of comments, 4 or 5 rounds of comments, that really can drag it out quite as long as anything else. But the problem is the confidence in the project and the fact that it can move forward or not move forward. So that would be sort of the big one. Number 2, there are a couple things in regards to trees and electricity that I would love to sort of personally help draw some attention to. One is we have 2 issues with trees. We love trees in Palo Alto. I'm a big believer in trees. The more trees, the better. However, we have drought issues. We have water tolerance issues. So we really need to sort of resolve where we add trees and where we save water, because those 2 do seem to butt heads quite a bit. Additionally, there is some fire concerns. And I think that, having some flexibility to get trees farther away from the house to prevent damage to foundations and damage to roof structure, whether it's a falling limb, whether it's a fire concern, and you just want a little fire break, whether or not that's possible with some of these smaller lots. So sort of resolving some of those issues and really finding a better path forward, rather than saying you must plant 20 trees, except for you have to keep your water bill down, right? And on that sort of similar note, we're running into some concerns with electrical. That being that with the new houses, there's no gas allowed. Great, I'm all for it. However, we're also capped at a 400 amp panel, and you're only allowed to have 1 service per property. So you can't run a separate line to an ADU. The ADUs often take 100 to 200 amp panels on their own, and a main house can take 200 or 400 amps on its own, especially when you're required to have a Tesla charger now. And we're supposed to have the battery backups and the solar panels. It's, again, I can sort of see the problem coming down the pipeline, and I'd love to sort of make sure that we've got our eyes on it and we've got a good solution in place so that when these issues do come up, we're ready for them.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective.
Thank you. Councilmember Philsett.
Actually, as it happens, that's exactly what I was going to ask, what Greer just asked.
Right. Anything else? You can ask anything. I'm ready.
I guess you answered 2 questions at once. No, you're welcome to take the last minute to have any wrap-up comments.
Is there anyone else that had any questions for me?
I'll ask another one if there's time.
All right, Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, I mean, so the ARB, doesn't really focus on residential.
Understood.
And so, I mean, that's where you've been working. So I assume you wouldn't really have conflicts of interest with your projects, but.
No. And I am divesting from Palo Alto. Like I said, I'm really sort of stepping back from taking on new residential clients just in case.
Okay. But it sounds like you have the experience reading architectural diagrams. And again, you mentioned a couple of commercial projects the first time we talked. I guess on the commercial side, have you seen any projects in Palo Alto that you thought either went well or did not go well?
Great question. I actually have 2 that I can think of. One's in Palo Alto, one's not, though, I'll admit. So the one that I saw in Palo Alto that really has always sort of rubbed me the wrong way is actually the new development on Alma, where it used to be a Lucky's and there was like a donut store tucked back there. And then it was an Albertsons. And they converted it to what was Mickey's grocery store, and now it's grocery outlet. Something about that structure, the way that it sits so close to the site, the way that it's sort of oriented, it really has been kind of an eyesore. And I have to admit, and I apologize if anyone worked on it or anyone loves it. It's just my personal preference is that it's not an inviting center to be around. And I think it could have been done better. So that's one of those that I would love to have seen that plan in the early stages, what some of the other concepts were, why it was situated so close, why there's this big wall. One that actually I would like to point out, and apologies that it's not a Palo Alto project, but one in downtown Los Altos is this Enchante Hotel right at the corner of San Antonio and downtown Main Street. Now, that one I remember looking at the posters thinking, oh God, this thing's going to be hideous. And it really turned out quite beautifully, and it really softened that corner. It did some beautiful things. Now, the backside of the hotel, there's always a not very attractive side to any piece of architecture. So the backside's not my favorite, but it really added quite a lot to that corner of Los Altos and really is a very inviting, welcoming facade to look at when you're coming down the street. So I'd love to see more things like that are inviting and welcoming rather than something like we have on Alma that really just feels like a big concrete wall.
All right. Thank you very much. And that wraps up our interview, but thank you for your application.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, it looks like we ran a little bit over on time. So I
It's okay.
apologize to whoever's coming next. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Yep. And our next candidate is here in chambers, João Batista de Rosa. Welcome.
Thank you.
So if you'd like, you have a minute or so to provide some introductory remarks, and then we'll ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, Council, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here today, giving me the opportunity to be part of this family, and also give me a good chance to return back to the society, possibly. I'm not a licensed architect in the United States, but I'm the licensed architect in Macau, which has belonged to Portugal. The reason why I'm not licensed in here is two reasons. Because when I came here, I want to try to take the exam. They said, oh, you got to go back to school and take another 4 years before you can take the exam, and also have 2 years practice. So I just forget it. Second reason is because I also do real estate development. When I do real estate development, I'm wearing too many hats. I'm also a builder. And the insurance company said, hey, you better not wear too many hats, okay? You love design, you can own your company, but get your partners to step for you. So that's why, I practice architecture for 36 years, but basically I'm doing design entitlement as well. Most of the time I'm spending it. And I'm also a teacher. I'll teach at a university, I teach urban design. And also lately, in the past few years, I spent a lot of time involved in the nonprofit. And such as this one, pro bono services. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Councilmember Filsa.
Oh, sure. So first of all, thank you very much for applying and being willing to do this. So much appreciated. From an architectural perspective, do you think that there are differences between Palo Alto and other cities around here that we ought to consider and be aware of? Either stuff we can learn from other cities, or alternatively, are there projects that would work well in Palo Alto that wouldn't work out well elsewhere, and vice versa?
I think it's a big difference. First of all, I'm living in Castro Valley. My office is in Burlingame. You might ask, why are you interested in Palo Alto? My first job was in Palo Alto, in Hamilton. I've done several projects in many residential projects and done some commercial projects on University Avenue. That was back years ago, and all changed right now, and they all disappeared now. And I also worked from Monterey County all the way up to Napa Valley. Along this corridor, Palo Alto played a very important role in the middle. Palo Alto is the leader of Northern California, I would say that. You have the top-notch diversity in the world, great cooperation, and more importantly, is the culture you built is a certain segmentation that dictating the beauty, the special, the uniqueness of Palo Alto. Once I see that, I immediately want to jump the gun to want to do that because I want to be part of it. I think important things is when you're asking what should you learn from the neighbors, you're not learning from the neighbors. What you need to do is harmonize with the neighbor. and you are the leader, and you're moving forward, Palo Alto, you are learning from the entire world. I would say that. If Palo Alto, touch wood, have something happen, if Palo Alto have a cold, I think the Bay Area will have the flu. That's what I'm. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. DeRosa. My question is not about the work that we do, what we do, but how we do it. So I'm wondering what 2 words would people use to describe you and how you do your work?
For 36 years, can I have a little bit more instead of 2 words? Okay, I have a 3-2-1 rhythm. Okay, 3 T's, 2 heart, and 1 mission. 3 T's is reliability, responsibility, and integrity. 2 hearts, I need to have a compassion heart and a passion heart. And I have 1 mission, to love everything I work.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing?
1 mission, to love every work I'm working. Love all the works I'm doing.
Okay. Sorry, I could not write as fast as you were speaking. Reliability, responsibility, and integrity?
Right.
Okay. And then compassion and passion were the 2 hearts?
2 hearts.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, so you mentioned you were architect in Macau. Look like you have a lot of education, and it looks like you've managed architects. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
You manage architects?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you describe like the largest commercial project that you've worked on?
Well, as for this year, almost finished. It's been doing close to 6 years. It's the winery in Napa Valley, from the production to a guest house. Right now, we're doing the last phase is a hospitality, which is cover all the wine tasting, restaurants, all kinds of stuff. And altogether, the site itself is 50 acres. And altogether, the winery is 100 acres production winery. And it's called Matera. Matera, it's a pretty good one.
Was this a customer or a personal project?
Personal project.
Yeah, okay.
Personal project, yeah. Yeah, well, whatever I practice right now, I've done a lot of projects, commercial project. I know you're interested in commercial projects, you know. I'm very involved in Millbrae. I've been 20-some years in Millbrae. I'm very involved with their planning too, to redevelop the downtown and everything. I've done many restaurants in Millbrae. And also I've done some projects, commercial, I'm talking about downtown. It's Burlingame and also South San Francisco.
Yeah. Do you, so your office is in Millbrae, but do you live
I've been Millbrae for 28 years, then I moved to Burlingame.
You live in Burlingame?
But I live in Castro Valley. And I never done anything in East Bay.
Got it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Koo.
Thank you for being here, Mr. DeRosa. I wanted to ask, in urban design, a lot of times they talk about building to the street. So it could be a tall building or, you know, even commercial buildings that build up to the street. Do you see what the pros and cons on that could be?
Well, if you let me talk a little bit more about the how we define what is the proper building on the site. It's we are human. We born, we get old, we get sick, we get die. Okay, building are the same thing, the same life cycle. But the thing is, the building lives much longer than us. But how we determine when we give birth to the building, we look at what the cultural already built in that neighborhood for that particular area. As I study ecological urbanism, there are few things much more than in order to do a proper building. It's environment, social, cultural, economics, all synchronized together in order to build a sustainable building. And we are not just doing the building a building to care about the past and to meet today's need. And we also think about the building for the future. Who will be our future people 50 years down the road come here to live in this city? I think that's more important. So it's more sustainable to make the building really last for years and decades. So that's whatever if we go for that route, you will find the proper building. What type of proper building should sit on the property? Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you addressed my question, which was around explaining further your concept of ecological urbanism.
Mhm.
So I'll defer to Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. DeRosa. I appreciate your interest in serving on the ARB when you're neither a Palo Alto resident nor employed in the city of Palo Alto. And I'm just kind of curious, why do you desire to be on the ARB when you neither live or work in this community?
I think most of the local people, a lot of applicants, they're going to be local, okay? You need that, definitely, because they've been here for long enough. But there's nothing wrong to get a third eye from the outside, to get a balance, to avoid the biases. I think that's a little touch on that. Not necessarily because of the experience background or something like that. A third eyes from the outside probably sometimes will give you some food for thought, to give you a better thought to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely see the benefit of having that outsider perspective. But I'm just curious. I mean, like as you said yourself earlier, everything you work on, you love and you really enjoy. So I'm just curious why you want to serve on this body.
Well, as I said, I wanted to return back to the society. I don't want to spend my entire life just looking for the dollar sign. So I do a lot of pro bono work. And also, not just here, I'm coaching a lot of students in the university as well. So that's what I want to do. I want my book in the last page to conclude it with something else, not just architecture, Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your interview, and we appreciate your interest in the position.
Do you mind I have few words, So.
Very briefly.
Very briefly. Oh, okay. To be honest, actually, whether I'm selected or not is not important. The most importantly is you're giving me a chance to get to know you, and you get to know me. So if anything that not necessarily this type of job, if anything you feel like I'm fitting in, I'm ready to do any pro bonos. And the last is I wrote 2 books, and I wanted to share with you folks. One book is how to build your dream home. The second book is how to maintain the dream homes. So I'll leave it to the staff. So you can share and enjoy it. And it's very easy to read, simple English, no jargon, and tools and tips. And one thing, if you cannot fall asleep, guarantee is the best sleeping pills, okay? Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you. All right. Our next candidate is also in chambers, Mr. John Kunz. Welcome. And please feel free to give us a few opening remarks, and then we'll.
Thank you very much. I'm awed with my predecessors. We in Palo Alto are very lucky. So personally, I got interested in architecture when I was about 3 years old. I was living near the Frank Lloyd Wright Roby House and frequently walked by it. And from the time I was 3 to 6 or 7, when my family moved, I just loved that building. And now, these days, I'm a walker and a biker. And one of the phrases I came across along the way is the gift to the streets. And architecture is a real gift to the streets. And so as a walker and as a biker, I look for these gifts, usually or often. I like them, sometimes I don't, but I just really react to that. Finally, I had a diverse professional experience, but I ended up in the last 25 years at Stanford in the civil engineering department. And one of the questions that came up repeatedly is 2 words. Well, the themes of the classes I taught, and I taught a number of them, was collaboration and model, and modeling in particular. And I'll talk about that in a second, but I really emphasized the collaboration. And then to get people to collaborate, the thing that I found is that the 3D model that you can walk through and view from different aspects is enormously powerful. And so the thing that I advocated to students and in lots of consulting was involve everybody who possibly can help make your project better and everybody who can possibly get you in trouble. And I could tell any number of stories on both sides of that, where it was made a dramatic impact in the process of the project. I guess partially the reason I'm here is it was so much fun, but another big part was I taught these classes over a period of years, and I was really inspired by the interest and the enthusiasm of the students as they learned about what I call built environmental history, architecture over history, and then the way in which they related to it. And it was just so inspiring for me to see the way young people, gifted young people, were just so inspired. And I just thought that was really cool. And in part, I'm here to hopefully engage our community to do things that the young people who are here now and will come will be inspired by.
Thank you. Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you, Mayor Burt. I see from your application that you have in common one of the prior applicants that treeless facades without setbacks are visually distressing. And I absolutely share your belief in 3D models, especially for the train crossings. I've been a huge advocate for that. Okay, my standard question. What are 2 words that people who've worked with you in your professional or personal life would use to describe you and how you do your work?
So the 2 words that I used were collaboration, collaborative. Yeah. And the word that I used in my classes was model as a verb.
Okay.
And in terms of interaction, I would say really open. So one of the reasons why the model was so powerful was that it was really open. You could just see what's going on. There's nothing hidden. So to be direct in response to your question, collaborative and open.
Thank you.
In 2 words.
Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Mr. Coons. Thank you for applying. I like your background, interesting, especially all the experience you've had living abroad. I think that's a good perspective. I did notice you wrote a lot about the need for increased height in the city. I just wonder what you think would be an appropriate height limit in Palo Alto, and how you think that how you would blend that with lower density neighborhoods and transition heights, as well as kind of the character of a neighborhood.
Well, just at a personal level, one of the reasons why I got sensitive to the issue of the cost of living here is talking with my dental hygienist who comes up from Gilroy. And I can drive to Gilroy once or twice a year to get my teeth cleaned, but no way do I want my kids to go to Gilroy to get a classroom. We have a problem. I heard the chief of police at one of the meetings I was at say when he came here, all the members of the police department were residents, and now he's the only one. And you guys, speaking to us, should be aware that if there is a big problem, you're on your own because we can't get here. So a big thing for me is having access within our community for some of the people who we would call public servants. And I mentioned teachers and dental hygienists, but that's just a label. The way we're never going to get that with single family dwellings, ADUs or no, we're never going to get there. The only way, if we either want to, for ethical or practical reasons, enable more people to live here, or if we're forced to by the state, then the way to get there is with height. We have only a certain amount of land, and we want high asset utilization of that land. And so the only way to get there is height. Now, one of the things I commented about in my written thing is that my wife and I lived in Santiago for a while, and I have traveled all over the world. I've paid attention to the architecture all over the world, and by far the nicest, most pleasant, dense environment that I've ever experienced was in Santiago, where we had tall buildings and we had green on all 4 sides. And it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. So the way we're going to do it, if we choose to, or we're forced to, either one, is to go up. And the place we should do it is where there's not now a lot of high asset utilization of space. And I guess from a societal point of view, near transit. So that's along the train tracks and along some of the major roads. Now, I commented in the application that I sponsored some students to do 3D models of tall, high buildings that were big enough to pay for undergrounding the rail through the city of Palo Alto. And more or less at the time, that was $1 billion of, the air rights had to be sold for $1 billion in order to pay for the tunneling. And the students built big towers and they put them along the train track right of way. And then they took the 3D model to a coffee shop. And then they asked around numbers, 100 people, what you thought. And without exception, people said they'd much rather have the high rises and then the soccer fields that go with it than any of the other options that they looked at. And so I don't know whether that would work today, because this was now 7 or 8 years ago. But I guess the point is that the visualization to a large audience is so powerful. It's so powerful. And all we have to do is do it.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, I think you've been listening, but so I take it you're not a licensed architect.
I'm not a licensed architect.
And yet you haven't really worked on a commercial project?
I've worked on lots of them. So I've been a consultant to lots of projects. You've asked about the biggest one. The biggest one I was ever a consultant to was the high-speed rail in London, which was brought in more or less 15 years ago. And the general contractor, who is my client, brought in just all kinds of support. And after it was the commissioning, the Prime Minister said this was the first time in the history of the British Empire that a public project like this was brought in on time and on budget. And
were you on the engineering side?
Pardon me?
Were you on the engineering side of the
Well, I was really the whole project. So the engineering, the construction, but also architectural design. Do we have a station here or do we have it there? Do we have the exit from the subway here or there? Does it look like this or does it look like that?
Yeah.
All those.
And there's only a few seconds left, but is there an example of local architecture that you find particularly?
Well, the one that I mentioned was the Sunrise building.
Yeah. I mean, aesthetically, you like the
Sunrise?
Sunrise?
I think as I bike and drive by it, it's a gift to me. It's a gift to the streets. One of the things I like about it is that I think that it's very high asset utilization. There's a whole bunch of people who are challenged in their lives who have a nice place to live. They have amenities that they can walk to or get to easily, which I think is enormously valuable to have walkable amenities. So it's high asset utilization. It helps a needy subset of a community, and it's a joy for me to look at.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. That uses up our time, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you all.
And we're now at our final candidate, Dave Modwood, who's joining us via Zoom. Welcome.
Hi, this is Danny from the city clerk's office. We've tried contacting Dave by phone and by email, but unfortunately, I don't think he's able to make it tonight. Yes. So.
Okay, well, we have his application. I'd just like to comment that we had gone back out for this. We had 3 openings on the ARB, appointed 2 members, and went back out to solicit additional applicants for the 3rd. And we really got a very strong group of applicants, out of which we are only able to pick 1. But for those who are still with us from the applicant pool, I certainly want to encourage members or applicants to consider future openings here or in other ways that you can serve the community?
Yeah, just to
Oh,
be,
we have two at this time. I misread the cover.
yeah, we have two, and we also have the applicants we didn't interview tonight that interviewed before. They're still being considered.
Okay,
right?
well, very good then. Yeah, Councilmember Cormet.
Thank you, Mayor Burt. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that the clerk did in getting these new applicants. They outlined on page 6 of our packet, outreach to 17 local Palo Alto-based architect companies, social media engagement with AIA, Silicon Valley. So this went far beyond, I think, probably the outreach that's been done before. And I wanted to thank the clerk and her office for that effort, which paid off.
And Councilmember Du Bois, do you have anything else?
Just that we have two openings.
Yep, sorry, I misread that. All right, and on that note, that concludes our meeting this evening. Meeting adjourned.